morning to you here on This Morning, and let's bring him in. Joe Fortunato, our film study professor on a Friday morning, as we go to film school with Joe. And Joe, you're going to go back in time to a really creepy movie for us today.
That's right. Welcome, everybody. And today we're going to look at the 50th anniversary, believe it or not, of The Exorcist from 1973. Released December 26, 1973. It was directed by William Friedkin and written by William Peter Blatty, based on his novel. Stars Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Jason Miller, and young Linda Blair as the possessed young girl. I mentioned director William Friedkin. We just lost him last week, which is sad news. A great director from the New Hollywood system. This is one of his biggest, if not his biggest film, The French Connection, probably being the other. But so we're sad to have lost William Friedkin. A complicated figure, great director, but sometimes a little, shall we say, loose with the rules on set. There were times when he would do things with his actors that were maybe a little questionable in terms of safety. One time he pulled or had a grip slap the young girl Reagan. One time he had Ellen Burstyn being pulled with when she was supposed to be possessed by or attacked by the devil, and she ended up injuring her back, and it lasted kind of a lifetime. Another time he slapped William O'Malley, who was playing a priest. So these are some questionable things based on safety on set, but nonetheless, sad to have lost William Friedkin. A couple things, again, going back to the film itself. It won 2 Oscars for screenplay and sound. It was nominated for 8 others, including Best Picture and Best Director. It was Warner Brothers' highest-grossing film of all time when adjusted for inflation, and it was the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time. Now, I haven't checked the numbers on this, but that may have changed last week with Barbie, because Barbie is now, I believe, Warner Brothers' highest-grossing film of all time. But my point being is that it was very popular at the time. According to William Peter Blatty, who wrote the book, Warner Brothers wanted to change the title of the film after taking a survey because he found that nobody knew what an exorcist was, which is interesting now because it's just so part of our lexicon because of this movie. The famous vomit scene where Reagan projectile vomits on Father Karras only was done in one take. It was actually intended to hit Jason Miller in the chest, but the plastic tubing misfired, hitting him in the face. His reaction of shock and disgust was genuine, and kind of admitted later in an interview he wasn't real happy about that. Probably most people know this bit of trivia that because it's kind of in the popular culture, but the substance used to portray her vomit was actually thick pea soup. They actually tried Campbell's brand, but they didn't like the effect, so they went with Anderson's brand pea soup, which I've never even heard of, frankly. Some people think that this movie is cursed, and I don't necessarily believe in that kind of stuff, but aside from, just the storyline itself, there was additional problems, such as the stars being out for weeks with injuries. Jason Miller's young son was critically injured during the filming. There was a fire on the set, and, stuff like this that caused delays. So conspiracy theorists will be out there saying that the film itself was cursed. And, one of the things, too, that because of the controversy of the subject matter, young Linda Blair, who was only, a young girl at the time, she actually received death threats from religious zealots who believed that the film glorified Satan. And so Warner Brothers had to give her bodyguards for about 6 months after the film.
Wow, that's interesting. With us, Joe Fortunato, taking us to film school. And this movie, Joe, wouldn't you agree, really set the stage for other types of movies in this bubble? Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, they all came about, but this was the leader of the pack.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always sort of say, call Psycho the godfather of, no pun intended, of the horror genre. But in terms of sort of more modern horror, I would say The Exorcist you're absolutely right. It sort of set the tone. And horror is not really my genre, but, this certainly is a classic. In fact, it was so when the film was released, it affected audiences so strongly, like Psycho or Jaws or whatever, that a lot of people were fainting during the filming, and theaters had paramedics on call. There was a post in the Toronto medical paper claiming that 4 women who saw The Exorcist in theaters were so traumatized that they were confined to psychiatric care. We always like to talk a little bit about casting. Yeah. The studio wanted Marlon Brando for the role of Father Merrin, but William Friedkin vetoed this immediately, saying he didn't want this to be a Brando film, because if Brando was in it, it would be that, and he wanted it to be the kind of film he wanted to make. The usual names were up for grabs at that point. Jack Nicholson. William Friedkin thought Jack Nicholson was too, quote, unholy to ever play a priest, which amuses me a little bit. Audrey Hepburn wanted to play the role of Chris McNeil, but she would only do it if she could film in Rome, and they weren't going to do that. Anne Bancroft was another choice, but she was pregnant at the time. For the young Reagan, the role of Reagan, some of the names that were bandied about: Jamie Lee Curtis, who of course would later kind of grow up to be the queen of scream, as you know. Eve Plum, Jan Brady from the Brady Bunch. Wow. Laura Dern. So some other names were considered for some of those roles.
There you go. The Exorcist. It was released 1973. Today's Film School with Joe Fortunato. Joe, as always, thank you for the time. Always appreciate it. We'll end it with a little theme of The Exorcist here in the background. Joe, we'll do it again next week. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, look forward to it.
All right, there you go. Joe Fortunato, film study professor, takes us to film school each and every Friday at this time. 21 minutes. I have to tell you, I watched that movie once, and I can't watch it again. It is extremely creepy to me, and I just can't watch it again. If you haven't seen it, watch it for the very first time.